Welcome back to the Quake World Championship here at QuakeCon 2023. I'm DJ Wheat, joined now by Lethal and Ketchup again. Gentlemen, we're about to go into our second matchup here on the A stream. The matches are kind of moving through. We're already seeing some early results, but still pretty early. Our next matchup is going to be CNZ taking on DANDAKIng. Welcome back, gentlemen. How's it going?
Yeah, it's been going pretty damn well so far. You know, we've seen a couple of matches quite early on. I was just watching the Garpin match between Tox earlier, which was very, very close considering the circumstances between the two.
What was the result? Because I've been here the whole time.
It was a Tox 2-0.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
It was. But going into this one, it's going to be tough between the two because DANDAKIng is probably the kind of player I do not want to go up against straight off the bat. He's one of the players who comes out the gate strong. He's very aggressive, great combat skills as well. And you don't want to deal with that first thing in the morning, do you?
No.
You don't. But if there's one player out there that, especially at the moment in this group stage, that has been able to show time and time again that they can match those kind of styles and has been historically a little bit more on the reserved side of their mechanics, is CNZ.
Yeah.
And you know, when we think about CNZ, we realize that this is a player that has been in Pro League before.
Right.
You know, we've seen him been there, done that, worn the t-shirt, has been there tons over, which I think in that respect gives CNZ quite the advantage. But I feel like DANDAKIng, he's not going to be the kind of player that's really phased by that. I think he's going to be rather fearless in these groups.
Yeah, I mean, you could really kind of start to break it down, whereas like DANDAKIng is like, you know, qualified yet again, getting another shot, probably pretty comfortable kind of getting through. Not a whole lot of pressure, right, even though you're trying to advance to the round of 16, where CNZ, having kind of come back in, he's been in, you know, in the Pro League, he's been in the regular season. We haven't seen him over the 18 weeks, right, but he qualified. He's clearly still got some skills to pay the bills, and we're going to get to see, right, how he looks here in this first matchup. So I would agree, like a very interesting matchup that we've got here for our second game. And I think just based off historics from CNZ, you would kind of expect that he could, right, he could do this. But I don't think DANDAKIng's like going to be a real easy pushover, right?
No, it's not at all. And it's very different styles as well. You've got CNZ, who's like known for his defensive capabilities, his timing as well. And he's got a match up against someone who's that aggressive first thing in the morning. He doesn't really care at all in terms of like who he's up against. It's quite a scary feat in itself. Yeah. And CNZ looking to try and do his best to get out of his groups, and with the situation he's got to place himself in, we need to see a really good start from CNZ to not really say have a chance or cause an upset, but DANDAKIng definitely could at this point.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, before we jump into our picks and bans, talk a little bit more, we got a chance to sit down and talk to CNZ. Let's see what he had to say.
I'm not representing any organization, so my nickname is CNZ. It's come from Dota 2. He's my favorite hero or champion, named as Klinks. Right now, my favorite champions are Nyx and Slash, because they're so fast in the game, and you can really easy control the map, and also you can very fast move over the map and find your opponent, or you can run away from him. My favorite weapon right now is lighting gun, as it was before. I really like use it because it's very effective and makes a lot of damage. This is my second QuakeCon. I came here 5 years ago. I'm going to play my first match versus DANDAKIng. It's a very strong guy from Australia. And the second opponent is Chain. It's my friend. And it's gonna be tough. It would be nice to meet someone like Rafa or Killzone in any stage of the tournament. I think we have several strong players like Killzone, Rafa, Wenger, Razy, and they have much more chances to get this belt than the others. I would like to say hello to everyone who is watching right now, and I would like to wish good luck and have fun to every player of this tournament.
Well spoken there by CNZ. Definitely some takeaways, right? I want to fight Kilson or Rafa in the grip. Very aspirational CNZ, but I have to say that seems pretty comfortable, right? Mentions it's a second QuakeCon, knows exactly what he's kind of got going into in the group stage. Yeah, it's rough when you have to play buddies, but in the arena, right? And sometimes you have to cut the throat of your best friend, right?
We were just talking in the previous series of the day, the dynamic that can be introduced when someone is less experienced with this kind of setting. CNZ is, of all the players that we have here, one of, and when I say players, I mean those that made it through challenges. Obviously, the same does not apply for those in Pro League. CNZ has been there for so long and has done this so much that even things like Media Day, you know, getting your picture taken, sitting down and doing a video that you just watched at home, it's all something that is not unknown, which means that in theory, the only thing that is left for CNZ to do is sit down, load up the game, play the map, and do what he knows he can do. Because there's going to be absolutely nothing getting in the way of that. Because CNZ doesn't get frustrated. He doesn't get tilted. He tends to show very little emotion in general. Play. The only time I ever saw emotion from CNZ was back in Katowice on Molten Falls, and I shan't go into exactly what happened on that map. I'm sure some of you at home probably know what I'm talking about. But that's the only time I've ever seen any reaction from him. So I think, given the cutthroat nature of this group stage, I feel very confident that he's going to be able to make it through. Now, DANDAKIng is just well experienced in most things Quake. You know, that's the difference, is that, we haven't seen him loads in Pro League, but we've seen him in Quake, and that's going to mean quite a lot too.
Well, we've got our picks and bans ready, so let's take a look at those. And Letha, we're going to send it over to you to break these down for us.
Yeah, one thing I was going to mention as well, because CNZ always used to be very good at Molten Falls. It's one of his go-to maps once upon a time, but of course, like I said, time being a key word, things may have changed since then. Veil and Deep Embrace banned straight away. Going to Corrupted Keep, which has been a bit of a trend for a lot of these players. First thing this morning, it's going to be the BJ versus the Ranger, the Fina versus the Strog, and then last it's going to be the Slash versus the Nyx. In my opinion, this has all been pretty standard. We know with Corrupted Keep, we normally see that usual Strog versus Ranger matchup, but we're not going to get it this time around, but we will see the Strog going on to Awoken. But you can see in terms of the game plan here, most of the majority of those larger maps have been pretty much banned towards the end of the situation, and CNZ wanted to give as little mobility as possible with the champions remaining on that final map, banning that Doom. So of course Dan does have that slight edge in terms of being able to get away or use that aggressive ghost walk for some of these items, but it's going to be a few issues for him with that Slash though, because CNZ not been known for being one of the greatest Slash players, but it will be quite beneficial for him going to that third map if it does get that far.
She's just a good champion on Blood Covenant. Although, to be fair, at the start of the day, we did see the Slash not work out in favor of Athena from Buckster. Less the champion, more the positioning. So, you know, that is something that players always have to be mindful of, is to not let their movement get ahead of themselves. We have seen players in the past that have picked the crouch sliders in particular, and they're almost too fast. They just sort of slide right into unsafe situations. You get ahead of yourself, you take a bunch of damage before you know it, the map's gone. Obviously, do not think that's going to happen to CNZ at all, but yeah, I mean, we're looking at the Corrupted Keep here, two very safe picks. Awoken, the removal of the visor, either used for Awoken or setting up for Blood Covenant. As we know, visor on Blood Covenant can be a real pain in the backside, and CNZ, I got to say, I don't historically remember him using too many of the fast champions. When I last saw CNZ in Pro League, I used to see a lot of mediums. I used to see a lot more reserved champions designed for a slow play. Love to see what modern CNZ is going to show us.
I mean, it might be indicative a little bit of just that meta switch that we've seen throughout the 18 weeks here of QPL Season 4. I mean, I think CNZ's best scenario is that he takes down map 1 and 2, because definitely I would agree with Nyx on Blood Covenant. I don't know, but what I get from these is that they both are ready to fight, right? They're both ready to put us in a small cage and let's go at it. Be very curious to see how, especially that first one, like such a pace setter with Corrupted Keep, and how that might actually pan out. So I think we're getting close to jumping into this matchup. And CNZ mentioned it, but right, Chain is the other individual in that group. Strong player, had a reasonable performance throughout the regular season. Also, right, friends there. So a familiar matchup for CNZ and even for Chain, but both have to get through DANDAKING in order to make that happen. So Corrupted Keep is going to be our first matchup. And CNZ did say, hey, I love me some LG right now. Not surprised to see the BJ pick there on Corrupted Keep as a result of that. One thing that we'll be looking out for. So any other thoughts before we jump into this this match?
I was thinking about a champion choice, and I'd probably say, considering what we saw across those 3 maps, CNZ has the slight edge, has the Athena on Awoken,
sure,
has the Slash on Dark Covenant. I kind of feel what we see on Corrupted Keep, I think it's just debatable if he wanted to use the Strog or not. Maybe using that LG with the dual with the BJ may be more beneficial for him to a certain standpoint, but it depends how much Dan can actually bait it out and use that orb to go in.
Yeah.
I kind of look at it the opposite way too. I think some potential punish opportunities. Should an orb be used badly, you're able to punish it with dual wield and shred, because at that point Ranger has no way to escape. On the opposite end, if Ranger's use of the orb is good from DANDAKING, then at least CNZ is going to have some kind of element of explosive damage to match it.
Yeah, the threat is interesting because obviously it deals a ton of damage, but it can also be a deterrent, right? Which is exactly what we saw in like the Buckster versus Celts matchup. But anyway, looks like we're jumping in around. Well, in fact, we're live, so gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you very much, Wheat. We'll now jump in and check out how things are going to go, as we've already jumped in from CNZ's point of view. And I'm sure his camera's going to focus at some point. If not, who cares? He's focused on this match. We ain't going to get in the way of that. But now the fight towards LG room has already begun. And the fight for the control of LG early can be such a dangerous tactic. You know, it can be such an effective way to secure that first frag. And even at this point, CNZ trying to pepper out a little bit more of that LG, but just didn't have the ammo really. Had to be a lot more reserved with it. And has been all round not in a good position. So much health had to be conceded there. Backing off, at least there's a heavy to fall back to, Lethal. But I think right now, things are looking rather even. The only problem is DANDAKING has an orb, CNZ doesn't have dual wield.
It's caused a few issues. He hasn't got any LG ammo in his back pocket, and he hasn't even got any rockets yet, so he's been heavily reliant on that heavy machine gun for the last minute. But in all fairness, it is a very heavy machine gun orientated map, so it's understandable to try and get at least something done using that fake orb to make him assume that he's going to try and approach him for that heavy and get his close range combat skills into play very early on, but that seems to be the case. CNZ and Dan so far, both of them almost equal stack. Dan with a slight disadvantage, even more now in terms of stack there, and CNZ's in a very good spot, but trying to find him. What a lovely rocket to start things off in this series.
2 little piece there, the tri-bolt initially, and then getting a wonderful call out on DANDAKING. DANDAKING with a really aggressive push, a push that was so close to working out, but unfortunately didn't. So now the aggressive push there with the super shotgun and the orb, that is going to be a lovely recovery, and at the same time, DANDAKING's able to take that heavy. So tried to go in for a major push there, did not work out, but who knows? I wonder if almost DANDAKING knew there'd be something to fall back to if it didn't work. The orb was good to go, then the heavy was afterwards. However, he's taking a lot of damage from CNZ, who secures yet another frag, but it wasn't clean, and still has 5 seconds until the Mega is going to appear, and the timing that DANDAKING had was used perfectly to get the frag and then get the item.
So like I said before, this is not the kind of play you want to match first thing in the morning on a in day number 1, and he's doing exactly that. Now it's all tied up 3 apiece, considering the fabulous start that CNZ kicked off with that rocket in that red room, and we saw Dan using that orb earlier on to get that second frag for extra insurance to save himself any damage. So little bits and pieces here and there starting to add up in terms of their stacks. And speaking of stacks, so Dan is looking in prime position to try and contest this heavy, but he's been caught off guard with the LG, and that was a great play from CNZ.
Wow!
It comes straight out from Dan afterwards, still all tied up.
It has been the ability to make these frags that CNZ obtains not meaningless, but nowhere near as impactful. DANDAKING's been having such a strong mental idea of just what the stack remaining is, and knowing what your resources are to go in and basically equalize like nothing happened. It kind of feels like CNZ has been a little bit in control of this, yet somehow the scoreline is 4-4. Every time a frag has been landed, DANDAKING is able to match it. However, we'll see if that's going to happen again. Raining down hell from up top. And that is going to be so much more damage than he was expecting.
Dan was just teetering on the edge there for so long. The screens from the left, right, and centre trying to get away, and that rocket for the TP did itself justice there. Still got the orb, hasn't got the armor to his name, trying to look up for those lights on that recovery process. Decent rocket, just a sprinkle there just to add to the tally, but he comes in with the rocket straight away, and look at that, picks up the mega, and we'll get the heavy momentarily. Huge stack, and this could be a way in now for CNZ to try not only gain lead, but increase it too.
The push begins. There is an orb ready to go, but the orb is going to whiff. The close range rocket certainly does a little bit more than you would have thought there. CNZ pretty low, but there's plenty of resources left in this map to soak up and absorb. In this case now, we're going to try and move towards this heavy if we can, but we still want to make our presence known on the mega. Concedes it from DANDAKING. However, at the same time, CNZ is going to know that, look, DANDAKING has the mega, but doesn't have really that much armor. So if I get this armor first, I've got my dual wield, I've got the access to huge damage. Didn't really work out too much, but that LG, oh my god, CNZ. Mate, calm down, we've only just started.
It wasn't like his movement was too predictable either. It was just lightning. Well, literally, we're not even at the halfway point so far. We've got 13 frags tallied up. And we'll have to see what changes Dan's going to have to make. Sometimes he's been a little bit too aggressive to go for those trades earlier on, but Heavy now up in the next second. He could back up for this, but some good rockets, but not enough to really turn the tide. But he can still contest this, but it's not going to get it in time. But you saw there CNZ took a little damage from that last rocket, but look how weak Dan is at this point. And he's got the info from that last nail shot going around the corner. So we'll have to see how he's going to approach this Mega. Mega's up in the next 10 seconds. And CNZ is running out of LG ammo, but doesn't seem to be too bothered by that at the moment. So he doesn't get any damage from that previous rocket, but the LG should do enough. Next second with the Mega coming up. Is she about to take him? No, he does not. Unbelievable as Dan does take him down with that heavy machine gun.
A frustrating way to lose a frag. CNZ just needed really one hit of anything there to secure the frag and then would have been able to pick up the major item, but it just wasn't happening. And now that orb is going to turn around and finish off the damage. A bit of LG at the end there to seal it. One frag behind only is DANDAKING, and now CNZ flying forward. We need that LG and we need it as soon as possible. And now we're going to duel it. We're going to look for it. DANDAKING with the clutch swap to the super shotgun. Lands that vertical blast, secures it now. 8 frags each, and we are split right down the middle. The armor's about to spawn. CNZ goes down, however, stole away the heavy, which means that CNZ might be able to refrag this, and he's going to do just that. Actually, DANDAKING tries to get an orb in return, doesn't, and now has 35 seconds without an orb available. That's going to be really good for CNZ with a lot of weapons in the tank, the chance to get one of these items. If there's no orb, you have way less to worry about.
It's been so back and forth. This is probably the first time in this matchup things have stabilised a little bit still, but the aggression continues now. He's going to try and clean up Dan if he can. He just manages to get around the corner onto that tri-bolt jump pad. And look, he's trying to sneak into the red room to try and fit, well, not
the
fit
read,
up, but try and recover. But yeah, that was textbook stuff coming out from CNZ as he's trying to pretend to go back around towards the rocket, drop down again, gets the heavy machine gun, but needs to get out of this awful situation, but finds him, does get a little bit of damage, but the LG from CNZ, but the orb is just that little bit better from Dan, now just tying things up once again.
The orb has been such a lifesaver for DANDAKING right now. So many of these fights where he's been, frankly, getting a little bit outgunned, but just having the orb available to deal with that situation really hasn't been used for mobility in any stretch. It has been for damage permanently. However, speaking of damage, here comes a lot of it. Dual wield. Man says, you want to hit me with a lot of damage? Well, I've got 2 LGs. What are you going to do now?
Yeah, not too much. CNZ now just trying to stay alive to try and contest that Mega, but still did quite a fair amount there. Needs to be a little bit cautious now, considering Heavy's up in the next second, but Dan gets him just before the Heavy respawns, and now he's in a prime position to finally be able to take that lead once again. He's trapped to LG. He doesn't have the heavy machine gun, but could do enough, but he's actually dropped down already, so he won't be able to go ahead with that game plan top mid and keep him pinned around the LG. But even then, he's running out of LG ammo. Hasn't got heavy machine gun either. It's going to be debatable what Dan wants to do here in this position. But around the arc of that Mega, it's going to be quite difficult. CNZ does take him down with the LG momentarily, though. So he gets the spawn across the heavy, but it's up in the next couple of seconds.
From that point, DANDAKING kind of just had to concede, knowing that you were going to anywhere near enough health to survive that. And then the second frag, sadly, looked a little bit like the rocket knocked him into the teleporter where he wasn't in control of his own fate there either. So CNZ, rather late in this first map, has been able to obtain 2 frags to work with. Not going to be a huge amount of time until that dual wield returns, but I'm liking this ranged play. You know, the orb from DANDAKING has been such a scary part of these fights at the moment. However, I think if we can just separate ourselves a little bit, the close range rocket is going to do it as well. Now 3 frags in the lead is CNZ, and at this rate, things should look pretty good for map number 1. DANDAKING needs to make something happen, needs to be aggressive. Problem is, dual wields ready, loads of rockets, plenty of LG ammo. Being aggressive is not going to result in a clean frag, and the clean frag is what you need if you're going to make a comeback.
This is going to be tough. I don't think we're going to see any clean frags. There's been no track record over the last 9 minutes. Been very back and forth, but now for Dan, he does have a huge stack, but it's like you said, it just needs to be a little bit careful in terms of like taking some of these engagements. But CNZ right now is making sure he's in all these different choke points in order to try and stay alive and also to maybe do some return damage, which could be enough to potentially trade. What a great rocket though. Backs off again, goes back over to the tribal, and now he's only left on 75 HP, but look at the stack from Dan. But CNZ doesn't need to go for the items now, just needs to chill for the next 20 seconds and he'll be fine. And after that last rocket, not a huge amount of damage, but it can be enough to be a little bit tilting. But you can see there, gets the heavy, so at least he takes one of the items away. May actually take him down, funny enough, considering he's been trying to get away for the last 45 seconds. But that's going to be it. CNZ will take this first map in this series, but yeah, it was pretty damn close, Ryan.
It was close for the vast majority. It was just right near the end there. I think one of the big things just looked a little bit like CNZ was creating more distance.
Yeah.
Less interest in those close range engagements. Sometimes it's not really a choice to make, because if you're choosing to fight on an item, you're probably going to be close to each other at some point because you're both wanting the item, right? But in a lot of those closing fights, especially the last 3 frags or so, was CNZ just putting a bit more space between them. You know, just even that small amount of space. It's more time for you to dodge the orb. It's more time for you to get around a rocket or something. And the use of the LG was absolutely fantastic, and the BJ is going to add to that wonderfully. But in a lot of these highlight moments, DANDAKING's frags, I mean, I kind of feel like the orb is going to be a pretty big part of it. So the fact that CNZ was able to win under those conditions, especially early on with DANDAKING, equalizing kind of as soon as he's been fragged. He would refrag, he would trade with a rocket. Speaking of a rocket, that one was absolutely lovely. That one was absolutely fantastic. But overall, a fast and furious start to the day for these two. And we're going straight into our next map, which I believe is going to be Awoken.
Yes, it was quite an interesting one to start things off, and yeah, definitely gave us a bit of time to wake up. We don't need caffeine here, consider what we just witnessed in that first map of the series. Absolutely ridiculous. But one of the biggest turning points, as you mentioned, and I think it's something I've got to bring up upon as well, is CNZ, and a lot of those duels he took, especially in terms of the lot of the aim duels they had, he always, majority of the time, had an advantageous angle or position. So, but Dan did come up with a lot of great ideas to create some surprise attacks and just come in flying. There was a few moments where he actually got away with that. But just looking at percentages so far, not really too much of a surprise there. 35% LG coming out from CNZ, 38.5% coming out from Dan, which again is known for his combat skills and his timing as well. But we'll have to see how this next one is going to go. Like I said, it's going to be on Awoken. I do believe it's going to be the Athena versus Strog, so this should flare up quite nicely here, Ryan.
CNZ mentioned that he's really a fan of the fast champions, and truth be told, that's not the CNZ that I remember. So
that is true. It's
been about a year since then, so we've had plenty of time to get well acquainted and kind of see what extra elements we might see from CNZ. And that's all about, you know, player growth and players further refining their game time after time after time, so that when you wind the clocks forward, and now here we are at QuakeCon, we get to see CNZ again with a slightly different pool than we're used to seeing. It just creates us being intrigued.
Yeah.
You know, and off that performance, DANDAKING, it was close, right? So we could absolutely go into a final map between these two. Plus, if I'm not mistaken, this map was picked by DANDAKING, so being able to play on the map that you picked yourself is always a good one, especially if it's one of your favorite maps.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I feel like Dan's still got a lot more on the plate to really deliver here on the table for CNZ, and CNZ just needs to be ready for it. It's like you said before, CNZ does seem a little bit different in a good way. in a good way, not a bad way, but in a good way in terms of how he's been performing so far today. But CNZ, he was always known to be someone quite neutral who would adapt on the fly and then maybe assess the situation and relies on his defensive capabilities and his timing. But it seems to be this time around he's a lot more aggressive. That was corrupt to keep, though. That can be quite a different story in itself, as we're now going to head into Awoken. It will be CNZ rocking the Athena. On the other side of things, it will be DANDAKING with that Strog. So we're going to see exactly how things are going to occur. If we will end up going to map number 3 and Dan ties this up, or if CNZ is going to be the one to menace. A nice little clean sweep to start the day here, as you saw CNZ did pick up the light, but did take some damage in the meantime from that previous rocket from Dan.
Apologies for the player camera, by the way. Obviously, is appearing a little bit blurry at the moment on both sides, but rest assured, I'm sure production will be able to sort that throughout the course of the day. We have only just started the show, so speaking of which, we've only just started this map, and that's going to be DANDAKING with a rail instantly within 20 seconds. So a good start there and a chance to keep things clean. The dynamic here between medium versus light, CNZ is going to have considerably less stack to work with, which gives DANDAKING just that little bit more padding, that little bit more opportunity to be aggressive or to make chase. Make decisions that you otherwise wouldn't because you just don't have the stack to fight back with.
This is exactly it, and Dan, after that first frag, didn't really take any damage at all, so he could just continue on piling on the pressure for these items.
Oh, I like that reaction.
Mega in 7, Heavy in 13, so he's going to pick that up nicely and then go straight into CNZ's face once he's managed to pick that up. He's just trying to gather as much info as possible before heading that way.
Hang on.
Does have, you know, a bit of time to try and get the high ground. He has it, and he's going to try and jump forward, but it does get away. Understandable for CNZ to get away. Has time to recover, but Dan, you know what he's like. This is a man who will absolutely have no holds barred with that aggression.
CNZ spent so much time near that Heavy, you almost assume that the timing just wasn't there, because hanging around at Heavy for that long, and then by the time it appears, you've only just used your grappling hook to get away. Like, did he have timing on that? I'm not particularly convinced, but what it has resulted in is DANDAKING having perfect timing on both and full control of the entire map. Couple that with all the weapons and all the ammo, plus the fact that you got more stacked than your opponent. Wow, that's a lot of Pika damage, and I gotta say, not used to seeing that much damage from the Hyper Blaster. Looks like so far this has been a rather wonderful map for DANDAKING. Where are you going? Get back here.
And again, look at his stack, Ryan. Didn't take anything at all. It's just been playing cat and mouse for some of these items. And what you were talking about with the previous Heavy, I think it was just more of an educated guess, but wasn't really the best of guesses, Sad. I think he was hoping to maybe contest that a little bit better and maybe get some kind of advantage. But because he went towards the choke point over to the rail, it was not really the angle he wanted Dan to approach from, so he had to get away straight afterwards. So we're just past that 2-minute mark here. Not the rocket he would like, but I'm sure we'll see a little bit more from him later. Hopefully not.
To be honest, Lethal, that's saying it. That's saying it politely. That is the last rocket that DANDAKING wanted to shoot in that situation. Could have been the difference between making chase and not. It has given CNZ a bit of a window to slightly disengage and to start to cement yourself. Unfortunately, did not hit that opening rail, but actually, that one landed. Either there was a last tiny section of DANDAKING's hitbox available, or CNZ just used the grappling hook to find some kind of angle. Either way, has brought himself back into this match. Needs to get the frags now, though. Being able to get those items, that's part of the battle, but it's not the entire one. DANDAKING with less armor as well. Can CNZ push through this? Going through that door is such a risk to take, but he just does not want DANDAKING to get the Mega. He has been able to pick it up. Oh, that rail missed! If that rail landed, that absolutely would have been a dead DANDAKING for sure. Misses the rail shot. In return, takes a bunch of that heavy machine gun. DANDAKING forced to disengage here, and in doing so, has kind of lost out on the last couple of fights. It's given complete items to CNZ, who, off the back of that heavy, is now looking to cement onto the Mega health. But the problem is, I'm not seeing any frags. There's plenty of time left to go, and let's make no mistake, but CNZ remains behind statistically.
Yeah, he certainly does indeed, just approaching that 4-minute mark, but now it's a complete role reversal. CNZ with the decent stack advantage, but it's going to make it even better, picking up that Heavy. Has the timings for him now, and now it's just a matter of how he's going to go about things. You can see Dan just holding into that T-junction. Look at all these rockets completely caught off guard. Yeah. And CNZ now, again, look at the stack. He can easily equalise things. He's going to push it with the LG and easy switch to the rocket if he wants to, but the Pika somehow comes and manages to get that third frag. And look at the HP that Dan was at the time. My God.
Basically nothing. Basically nothing right there. Now, CNZ with the drop down. Machine gun, and then no doubt Rail if he's got it. He spawned nearby, so I'm going to assume that he's been able to take that one. DANDAKING in the lead still, but it doesn't mean much at the moment. Not with the ferocity that CNZ is putting forward. And actually, I must say that this is a side of CNZ that I'm really glad to have seen flourish. That air of aggression, maybe even confidence. You know, CNZ, when I watched him play, I would always see a player that was a bit more reserved in their gameplay. Efficient, yes, but almost to a slow pace. Not always, but this is a very, very different experience, and one that if you're going to bring the heat for QuakeCon, this is the time to do it. The question is it going to be enough to secure this map? As CNZ is currently one map in the lead, DANDAKING needs this to tie it up. A nice little rocket to begin with, a nice little combo there into Rail, hits 2 back-to-back. Is satisfied to leave it as it is. We're going to take that armor first, make that divide between stack even greater, and then try to eye up this heavy. CNZ takes the heavy. That's now 4 Rails in a row that DANDAKING has been able to land here. He's going to try and make it 5, and makes it 5. He will! That's going to be 4-1, and a wonderful chance now for DANDAKING to bring us into a final map.
Making it look as though he's got Clutch's hitbox. Unbelievable. Like, just having the perfect angles every time. It wasn't like CNZ was making it easy for him either. Gets away again, but remember, CNZ has picked up the megas. Dan now actually manages to get a good amount of damage from those last 2 rockets, and then the direct just to seal the deal, making it his 5th frag now, 6 minutes in, and it's going to be a little bit of a worry now. He's got the peak coming up in the next 20 seconds. Mega's up in 10. He's in a good position for it. He's going to go up to the choke point just to make sure if he can try and catch him again. That last rocket would have definitely maybe been the final nail in the coffin, but that's going to do justice anyway. Now making it 6-1 here, Ryan.
CNZ is trying so hard to make his presence known on these items. You know, he's trying to get a lot of damage, but sadly, these rockets aren't really hitting their mark at all. You know, we're not getting any directs, and we're not even getting any splash damage, and that's going to just allow DANDAKING to continue to pressure on these items and continue to get the damage. Clean frags of which you can then set your sights to pressuring on the opponent's spawn. In this case now, an unwinnable fight in theory for CNZ, and by all means it will be. And with a performance like this, looking very likely like we're going on to our final map and figuring out how the story's going to end between these two. CNZ gets himself a frag. Now, 6 minutes, or 6 frags, sorry, in 3 minutes is technically possible. What I'm worried about, Lethal, is the fact that CNZ has less native stack. You are light versus medium. CNZ has got to be able to daisy chain these frags together, but most of the time when you land a frag here, you're going to have to restack in some way, and all of that is going to take time. Time your opponent can get weapons, time your opponent can waste on the clock.
CNZ was trying to surprise him again with that previous hook, but you could tell there Dan was a bit more ready for it this time, a bit more aware this time
He's
round.
just straight up is hiding around that corner. CNZ didn't look for him.
I would. Well, no, I wouldn't look there, but I'll definitely be hiding.
Hey, look, it's wasted about 20 seconds, at least. A fight's breaking out now, but that fight could have happened significantly earlier. Anytime these happens, DANDAKING with a lovely rail straight through the teleporter. That is what he needed. And now it's all about a game of angles, defensive angles. DANDAKING is going to stick that ear to the ground, and DANDAKING is going to listen. Where is CNZ? If I find CNZ, I would like to stay away from CNZ. And these defensive shots, whether it's rocket, whether it's rail, it's absolutely fantastic. We said now, a minute's gone by and not one frag has landed. This is perfect case scenario for DANDAKING.
Yeah, always put himself in a position purposely to have time to get away and then rethink and assess the situation with the info which has been gathered. Back in that T-junction once more, just trying to see where Dan's going to go next, but you can see from CNZ's face right now, he knows it's just maybe a little bit too late, but trying to make something happen now. Pika comes out, gets us so much damage done. He's actually available as well, but make sure to get away just in the nick of time. He's picked up the heavy. Oh my god, that would.
Oh, so there was one.
That was crucial. So still needs 5 in a minute 10. Very, very tough indeed. But yeah, it was just a little bit unfortunate it's happened so late.
That's the problem. It took far too long to get that first frag for what could have been a comeback, because now you've got 60 seconds to land 5 frags, and that's on the understanding that you're not going to lose even a single one in the meantime. DANDAKING, the defensive play continues. The rockets are really good, but punishes it with the rail, and I think there's where the GGs will come through. It's now going to be 1 map apiece, and well, this story continues, Lethal.
It certainly does. So we will go to map number 3, and I'm sure it'll be an absolute doozy here as they both won each other's maps, their own maps rather. 20 seconds left, and again, his rails are just ridiculous. I'm quite looking forward to his hit percentage. I hope it's not low or something like that, but I'm pretty sure it must be at least in the 50s from what we saw so far in this game. And against an Athena, it's just absolutely ridiculous. He's actually going to hit him once more just to add a bit more salt to the wound here. 11-3 now with 15 seconds left. Heavy is up. Hits another just for good measure and just for the giggles really at this point, Ryan. As we're going to close things up here, we'll be going to map number 3 shortly as before we have that trade. So for Dan, though, that's a nice way, a nice momentum swing for him now.
It's still very reminiscent of DANDAKING's LAN play. And I think that LAN play is something important to point out because he does not fear you. He doesn't care who you are. He knows what he can do, and he's going to jump into this map. And if he wants to be aggressive, he's going to be aggressive. If he wants to play a more position-based defensive game, we definitely saw a mixture of both on Awoken. We saw the pushes that were made with some absolutely lovely pressure on spawn as well, but then at the same time we saw DANDAKING slow down and pick those defensive rocket angles and capitalize on a rail as your opponent's trying to escape. Whatever the case may be, he did it pretty damn flawlessly here, and being one map down, being at QuakeCon, there are circumstances that would stress out maybe some players, but not him. And I think seeing that confidence and that, I think, belief in himself to push through, it opens up a very interesting final map, Lethal.
It certainly does, and of course, you know, Dan's been around the block quite a while, even since the Quake Live days. He's had some incredible plays. He even had a top 8 at one point at Quake Live, and he's had some great placements in the past as well. And it doesn't surprise me that he's just showing off his experience, knowing that, you know, it's so important. If you want to take someone down or topple them in some way, if you feel like they're equal in terms of skill or maybe a little bit better, you have to do it in the first match. By the time they're warmed up on day 2 or 3, it's pretty much neon impossible. As we look at the rails, yeah, I did say it'll probably be at least 50-58% against an Athena, which is just ridiculous in itself. The hit percentages weren't looking too good for CNZ. He's just falling apart a little bit towards the end with the 29 for the rail, 31 for the LG. Not really a huge amount to talk about there, but we'll have to see going into this next map because it's going to be an absolute doozy here, Ryan, as we go into it. Because, of course, we've had a lot of the smaller maps now in the pool. We've had a lot of the champions taken away, and how things are going to go this time around, it's going to be anyone's guess with that /Nix matchup.
I mean, let's not forget the fact that this is a pretty savage group.
It is.
I mean, like the matches you're going to have to play here. The fact that this is just the first, I believe this is the first match of the group that we've seen today.
Yeah.
And if it's going down like this to a final map and it's really close and it's clearly intense as well, I think it just spells good things for the rest of the day with the players remaining. And I guess the players in general, because just to remind everyone, again, we will be reminding you throughout the day, there's Quake and Quake 2. There are 2 streams taking place. One, I can't remember who's commentating it right now, but it's literally just over there, just behind the other curtain. So if you want to check out and stay up to date on all of the matches, make sure that you've got both of those streams open at all times. And that applies to tomorrow as well.
Certainly does, because of course we don't want any of you to miss out on any of the action here. And honestly, some of the stuff on the B stream is going to be absolute madness, I'm sure, over the next few moments. But going into this now, though, we spoke about this matchup and how it could be beneficial for one side. But I don't know your thoughts on how Dan's going to approach this, because his rail game seems to be very strong. Of course, he couldn't show it up on Squad to Keep. But it seems like for Dan, though, how the things this is going to go. Was this help with CNZ with his defensive capabilities and his time? It is going to help with Dan in terms of his preparation for the items and that rail as well?
I think I'm looking at consistency. Dan being more than in the fight in the first map and keeping his damage and accuracy pretty much matched CNZ, split down the middle.
Yeah.
I think CNZ got like a little bit more LG damage or something, but there were other weapons that DANDAKING kind of equalized with. In the second map, of which he won, he still looked just as good. And in this final map, you can only assume that that's going to continue. So it depends. CNZ is known for, or was, I think is the key word here. It's been a long time since. This is the kind of map that I would always look at CNZ with. You'd look at this, you'd look at Molten Falls or Ruins, those maps that were known for being a little bit bigger and, in theory, a little bit more calculated. I always favoured CNZ on maps like that. And you know, we are here on Blood Covenant. The difference is it's a different pace and a different champion. In this case, that rail was looking real good. The safety Ghost Walk is going to get pulled there from DANDAKING. Can keep himself fighting in there with a Mega. However, CNZ ready for the chase, and that is the strength of Slash. You want to escape? Well, here comes my slide, here comes my unrivaled speed, and of course CNZ starting off strong with rails that we really needed to see in the second map.
Yeah, that's one way to shut down the morale which Dan gained from that previous map. Good LG, looking to try and finish up with that rail. Doesn't hit it, but trying to use those rockets to stop him from going out towards the LG straight. Still hasn't got any rocket damage done as of yet. He's just going to dive in. He's not messing about here, but Dan perfectly understand we're using that Ghost Walk to get away. Heavy is up though, and now he's going to be able to continue his path of destruction if possible. And it's quite difficult with the Slash versus the Nyx matchup. We know the Slash has its advantages. We know that Dan has the, we'll be worried about the Hourglasses more than what CNZ will be in terms of that department. So could be a little bit predictable in terms of where he's going to be, trying to pick up that Ghost Walk as soon as physically possible. As he tickles him with the rocket, but great rail coming out from Dan. And just needs one more, but it's not going to be in time as he has picked up the Mega, but just hit him again with these rails. Just hard hitting, just continuing on from what we saw previously.
Not just that, but a champion-specific rail. Using that double jump to create a less expected angle around that corner. Kind of allowed for a free rail. Now DANDAKING making chase and allowing a rail to finish the job to make it 1-1. And CNZ for a brief moment must have just felt like he was safe to push forward, and DANDAKING with a rude awakening. 1 second now until Mega gets picked up, and here comes DANDAKING with all that health and a chance to push forward for another time. CNZ has been lacking in the armor department pretty substantially. That first rail missing does mean that the Heavy's going to get picked up, and there's nothing that DANDAKING can do about it. But what we can do now is try and limit the benefit from those. Oh, no rail ammo, thank the heavens you had access to that Ghost Walk, because if that click got heard around the world and there was no invincibility, CNZ, I feel like DANDAKING was done for there, Harry.
I felt like you saw my face there when I saw that. I was like, oh, this can't happen this way. But 3 minutes in though, still one apiece here. Dan looking pretty sharp compared to what we saw during that first minute. Heavy's up in the next couple of seconds, but he's just been railed. Has to back away again. Does have the Ghost Walk, mind you. Is now still hasn't got any lights to his name, been hit once again. One more will do it. CNZ trying to get a little bit creative and cheeky there from bottom mid. Doesn't get him sadly, but he is going to be bouncing back up to try and at least do something with this Mega. Dan's just staying in the open. He's like, I don't care like if I'm railable. I'm going to try and do my best and do whatever, because he hasn't got any rail ammo either, but that heavy machine gun is going to help him out a little bit as he's still trying to progress towards that Heavy. We'll have the positional advantage as well, but CNZ's so weak, he can't really continue this this return damage.
I must say, the fact that DANDAKING has been able to keep himself alive with just a heavy machine gun throughout that last minute and a half, it took a long time for him to only just pick up more ammo for that railgun. By the way, lovely shot that was, but CNZ was almost keeping him away from it. Almost knew that he didn't have any ammo to work with, so okay, all I've got is a machine gun. I'm going to do what I can, but more than enough damage to keep CNZ away and fighting. 5 seconds now until Heavy, of which DANDAKING will collect. 20 seconds until a Ghost Walk, so unless we can pick up some Hourglasses, we are going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. Maybe an opening rail or two. DANDAKING has been able to show, ever since he got ammo, I think he's fired 1 rail so far, and that shot was rather insanely good under near teleporter. So if we can just keep the consistency there, it's no wonder CNZ is playing this so careful. I think there's a lot of respect being shown to damage output here.
Perfectly understandable. Huge stack. Ghost Walk now available. Heavy up in 5. It's not looking so good for CNZ here, especially over the next 30 seconds. And when he's railing like that, it's just making matters a little bit worse, especially for your confidence to try and bring yourself back in this matchup. Is just lurking around for now, directly above him. Just going to at least sneak by. They've actually both completely gone past each other as well. And faking a couple of those rockets, but knows exactly where he is. CNZ, his game plan is just to back away. His game plan isn't to try and contest to his full potential some of these items or anything like that. Just keep his distance, do a bit of chip. That was a great example, but it needs to do it for at least another 30 seconds because his Heavy is up, but the rail, it should be CNZ doing the chip, but you can see now Dan is just all fired up and just catching him at every single point and every single angle.
That's the thing. CNZ is the one that has been slowing down the pace of this match, but DANDAKING has been more than happy to return fire. We finally see rare footage of a rail missing its mark here from DANDAKING. 5.5 minutes is done. Not a lot of it left to go, but DANDAKING consistently keeping more control of these items. The question is, does he push towards Heavy? Does he concede? I mean, it's been long enough that surely he's not going to. Actually, no. Catches CNZ off guard. CNZ just caught standing around. What the hell was that?
I think he was assuming he was still going to go around one of the passageways and
He
just
must
get ready
have.
to use a defensive rocket, but instead catching with the LG, but comes out again. Mega's going to be up in the next couple of seconds, and Dan obviously can't chase him down as of yet, especially off that last rail. And for good measure, he knows he wasn't available, but it's just more the case of he wants to save as much of his stack as possible for when he contests this heavy. It's obviously not in a prime position, even though he had the stack, so he's going to be circulating around again. He's got that ghost walk up in 5 seconds. And it's okay, don't get me wrong, CNZ using the slash, but that's one thing. But the fact that you've lost the lead against someone with a Nyx who's been really on point with his hourglasses as well.
Oh,
that's
that
some good rockets. That's unreal. He can't really do anything in this position. Gets the light, but gets railed once again. One more will do it to get that third frag. He's going to try and back away, but oh, he literally Ferrari picked from that last corner. Still doesn't hit him. That's so unfortunate there. But Dan's done at least enough damage in order to keep him on his toes and keep him away for now.
It's a shame because DANDAKING was being a total mind reader in that situation. Just knew what escape route CNZ was going to try and take and was correct 3 times back to back. Now we are starting to hit 2 rails. We need to get one more of anything from this position to make it count. CNZ has to disengage for another time. By disengaging, though, means that he has to give up a large portion of this map, and that is not what you want to do this late in the final map of the series. Now, DANDAKING only 1 frag in the lead here, and that rail, that's going to put you off to a pretty decent start, but you need more than that. DANDAKING, I'll take that rail, and I'm going to disengage. I've got a heavy to fall back on. Why do I care about it? Here comes the... Ooh, looking for the hell. CNZ quite rightly doing the safe thing and making all of us nervous at the same time.
Yeah, I was flinching a little bit, I'm not going to lie, but you could tell CNZ was, when he saw the ghost walk, he was like, yeah, he has the timing. He knows it's probably going to be, you know, in a few seconds time, but by the time it pops, he's going to be on that Mega like no tomorrow. 2 minutes 10. CNZ still trying to find an opening, but I'm not going to lie to you, Dan's not really giving him any room. All that heavy machine gun damage just to almost equal the stacks. Meg's up in the next second, and the decision's going to be, like, how is CNZ going to approach this? Especially when he's railing, like, the slash is pretty much a limited character. But even then, though, minute 45 left, and he's just been doing a great job, not only with the rail, but the timing and the prep for these items. Good LG with the rail, now trying to circulate around to try and at least do some damage whilst he's approaching that heavy. Oh, look at the heavy machine gun here, Ryan. Still just doing so much just to keep it even footing in terms of the stack, but that rail was huge for CNZ.
That rail was huge and unexpected, and at the same time, we'll see what that turns into, because now CNZ with significantly less armor than his opponents in this kind of matchup where you're eating rail after rail after rail, is that going to result in a horrible, horrible start here? Misses the rail on the drop down, drops down towards that light. That's certainly going to be better than nothing, but DANDAKING still in the lead. Wow, that rocket, make that 2, make that an LG to finish, and that could result in a map win. CNZ needs to stack up, get weapons, get in, and make a miracle happen.
Yeah, Dan's got enough for 2 ghost walks here over the last dying moments. Even with the speed and mobility that CNZ has.
It's still possible, but barely.
Yeah, literally barely. You're looking like a 20-80, 10-90 chance, depending if Dan makes an absolute fatal mistake. But, you know, with Blood Covenant, it's quite easy to lurk around these angles and try and
it's the ghost walk, Harry. It's the ghost walk. Exactly. The ghost walk is still ready to go.
Exactly. It needs to be popped, like, at some stage. But he's not going to. He finds him, gets a good rocket off. But is he going to be able to find him? He doesn't. He actually stays above ground as he went down below.
Could have just won the map. I think that's won the map for DANDAKING. That escape and CNZ not being able to find him, was able to get the ghost walk out, an aggressive push. 10 seconds. If you find him right now, there's a chance. There is no ghost walk, but DANDAKING is going to delay that respawn. 5 seconds left to go. 3 seconds. If he was just round that corner, maybe, but it wasn't enough time. And here comes the GGs with DANDAKING, making us sweat all the way up until that final second.
Yeah, what an interesting matchup, because after that first game, you just like, okay, like CNZ looks to be pretty good. You mentioned, right, that they swapped map picks and basically won each other's games. The second game was really interesting. The rail, I mean, actually in both of Game 2 and Game 3, there, like, DANDAKING had some pretty sick rails. That was one of them right there. A couple of just kind of, I couldn't even believe that he hit a few of them. But I think that generally, just as much as you guys all were, like, really impressed with DANDAKING's performance here. Yeah, there was just some remarkable plays here by DANDAKING. He kept it cool and just, you know, played based off of what CNZ was bringing, and it was close, but a solid 2-1 victory for DANDAKING.
Look at that, 41% with the rails, 1,690 damage, pretty much almost double compared to what CNZ had. But the whole point of CNZ's game plan for the majority of that game was just to find some chip and be able to enter in and then be able to rotate the items himself.
Yep.
But Dan was the one doing it the entire time in an aggressive manner, so there was not really any room for CNZ to get, you know, too creative of what he could do to punish Dan. It was just a real hard-fought victory there for Dan. But in the end, though, we knew that at some stage during the final minute that the Ghost Walk and how he's been lurking around the map and how he's probably like studied like CNZ's rotations during those 9 minutes and realised what he normally does in terms of his commitment to some areas of the map, and that's when we knew that, yeah, he's pretty much done for.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, definitely an interesting shakeup in that particular group. I think if you were trying to map out how you know, predictions for these particular groups, I'm sure a lot of people had CNZ up there to win this matchup, but DANDAKING throwing a wrench into all of that. It'll be interesting to see how that's going to shake out the rest of the groups.
That's what DANDAKING does on LAN.
It's
what he does.
I think you even mentioned it earlier. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised to see some potential shakeups here in the groups, and of course, there's still some matches to come, so we'll have to see how this is going to all play out. But CNZ certainly has got to feel like, okay, that wasn't exactly what I expected, but DANDAKING, well played.
It's really hard to question it, isn't it? Because at this level of play, everyone's good and everyone's capable. Like, some players will be favored, but at the end of the day, a tournament's a tournament. You rock up on that day, and if you play the best you've played, or if you play even close to the best Quake you've ever played, you've got a good chance.
Yep.
So, you know, it's hard to say that CNZ did anything wrong in that series. I feel like in the second map, accuracy could have been a bit better, particularly the rails. Had a real hard time securing that range damage really when he needed it in those like tiny little moments, whereas DANDAKING just wasn't. It was just damage.
He's got a track record for this,
and we saw it on all three maps too.
Track record, man.
You know, there just wasn't as much consistency in the damage department. I think that's the only thing I can really pull apart.
Well, that's the game 2, or the second series here on the A stream, but we've got a lot more coming at you here for the remainder of the day. Game 3 coming up soon, or match 3 coming up soon, so stick around. We'll be back with more here from the Quake World Championships. Don't go away.